Okay everyone, we're going to look today at using the Language Paper 1 Question 5 technique of drop, shift, return and zoom in, leave and zoom out. Now, Language Paper 1 Question 5 is so important. It is worth 40 marks, which is worth half of your English Language Paper 1 and a quarter of your English Language GCSE. You need to spend a minimum of 45 minutes on this question. If you don't spend that time, you will not get the marks, and you must plan your response. Let's have a look at an example question. So for this, you get a choice of 2. That is not the same as Language Paper 2. So it's really nice that you get to show a little bit of creativity here. Let's take a little look. So the first thing it says, it tells you the time. You are advised to spend about 45 minutes on this section. Write in full sentences. You are reminded of the need to plan your answer. You should leave enough time to check your work at the end. Now that is really important because if we look down the bottom here, you get 16 out of those 40 marks for technical accuracy, and that basically stands for spelling, punctuation, grammar. Does it make sense? Have you made any silly little mistakes? So let's take a little look. These are some sample questions. So you get a choice, as I said, and here's the 2 that we've got here. So it's either write a description suggested by this picture or write a story about a time when you met someone very different to you. And we're going to look at both of those questions today using the drop, shift, return and leave technique. So the first thing to say is actually these 2 questions are not connected. So you do not, if you have a go at this second question, you do not have to link it to the image. So you don't have to base your second question on the image, but if you do the first one, you have to link it to the image. So let's take a little look at the first question. Now you'll choose the one that you like the most, and in the exam you'll be able to decide that quite quickly. But we're going to go through both. I'm going to look first of all at this first question. So it says, write a description suggested by this picture. Now the first thing I need to say for description, actually description is just a very small moment in time, almost like a moving image. A moment in time, it's just a little kind of snapshot. It's not a full story, it's not days and days and days of things that are happening, it's just a moment in time. Now it is really important, let's have a look at this box at the bottom, that for this description the easiest way to get marks is to write in first person so that you can really show emotions and perspective, and to write in the present tense, and we'll see why that's important in a moment. So using the drop, shift, return and zoom, leave and zoom out technique, just erase this so I've got a bit more space. We're going to use these 4 sections. Now these are not 4 paragraphs, they're 4 sections, and actually you're going to want to use way more than 4 paragraphs in your entire piece of writing. The first section, let's take a look, is the drop section. Now I've called it drop because we drop our reader, that is the person reading your writing, right in the middle of the action. And there we need to be really clear about who we are, what we're doing, where we are, when it is, the time of day, the season, and why we're there. We need to create a really clear opening so that we can draw our reader in and so that it makes sense. Then we're going to shift. We're going to have a flashback to an earlier memory. It could be an hour before, it could be the day before, it could be a year before, it could be in your childhood, whatever fits with your image or with your story. Flashback to an early memory. What has led you to this moment? And we're going to look at an example of how that's working with this picture in a minute. Then we're going to return to the present. We return to the present and then we pick an object. Now with object, it can also be a person, and we describe it close up. We describe it in lots of detail and we start thinking, what does it symbolise? How does it make us feel? You've got to pick an interesting object for that. And then finally we leave the scene, we move somewhere else, we leave where we were. How do we do it? How do we leave? Why do we leave? Then we're going to describe the setting around us. What do we see? What do we hear? And here's where we zoom out. We start kind of making a clearer picture about where we are and where we're going. And then we kind of finish with how these make us feel. So let's take a little look at this image. Now, before we look at the image, the thing to say when you're planning is I want you to be a bit like a magpie. Now, magpies are famous for stealing, and they steal lots and lots of precious things. And actually, in our writing, we can be magpies as well. We don't have to think of something completely original. We can base it on stuff that we've already heard. For example, things like Netflix. If you've watched a really, really good movie, you might want to steal an idea from that. You might want to pick a character from that. If you've played something on your games console, you might pick an element of a game that you've played. Or if you've read some great books, there might be something in there that you want to steal. And actually, I've done that for my story here. One of my favourite books is a book called The Bedlam Stacks. And in it, this picture, go back to the picture, it really reminded me of that book, because in that book there's this kind of creepy story about this child who's found abandoned in a church. And actually that image of the candle made me think, that looks like a child in that picture, made me think of that book, and actually I'm going to steal that idea from the Bedlam Stacks. So let's have a look at my plan using the drop, shift, return and zoom and leave and zoom out technique. So first of all, I'm dropping in. So I'm being really clear about who I am, what I'm doing, where am I, when is it, and why am I there. So here's my plan, and I've stolen this from the book. I'm a young child, I'm feeling frightened and alone. I'm wearing ripped clothes that are soaking wet, and I've got blood soaking into my skin from my clothes. Into my clothes from my skin. What am I doing? I'm sitting in a corner in the church. I'm praying for safety. I'm shivering and crying. So I want to really create this kind of feeling of fear. I'm in an abandoned church. It's dark. There's lots of shadows, and I'm going to describe that a little bit. And when is it? It's nighttime in a rainstorm, and it's winter. And I really want to create this atmosphere of fear. And I think if it was a beautiful sunny day, I wouldn't feel as frightened. And why am I there? I found the church after wandering alone. That's all I need. I'm dropping my reader in so I'm clear about the story. Now, my next part is a flashback, a shift. I've got to tell the reader why I'm there and what's happened. So I'm going to flash back to earlier on in the day. I think this makes sense of the story. So earlier in the day, I'm going to remember how me and my mother, and this is stolen from this book, but that's allowed. I was travelling from the market that I visited with my mother, and she was selling jewellery. And we were attacked by this kind of gang of robbers. And I'm going to describe this attack, and my mother was left for dead. And I escaped and ran through the forest. Okay, so that's my flashback. That's why I'm there. That's kind of the backstory. Then I'm going to return to the present, okay? So I'm back in the church now. I'm going to find this candle and I'm going to light it. And the flame is going to flicker for a moment, and it's going to grow bright, and it's going to represent, because it's really important to think what that candle could symbolise. It represents hope, warm memories of my mother, and it's going to make me feel less afraid and less alone. And then I've got to leave this scene. I've got to move somewhere else. And the way that I'm going to do this is the door's going to open. There's going to be some light flooding in, and there's going to be a shadow of a man in the doorway. He's going to be quite tall. He's blocking the light. I'm going to describe how this hand, I'm going to kind of zoom out now and see this figure, and the hand is reaching towards me, but I'm not quite sure if I'm safe or not. I'm going to look around the church, and I'm going to see all these statues of all these saints, and the faces are staring blankly at me. Now, I don't know whether to go with this man or not. The candle's going to blow out, and then it's going to end on a cliffhanger, and my reader's not going to know whether I'm safe or not. And that's it. It's just a moment in time. I don't need to tell this big long story about my whole entire life. It's just a snapshot. But in it, I've created a really clear emotion. I've given a backstory, and I've had some sort of storyline in it. Okay, so let's take another look at how we would do this for a different type of question, because I want to show you another example of using the same technique. So the second question out of our choice of two is this one. Write a story about a time when you met someone very different to you. Now, when I saw this question for the first time, I had to do a little bit of thinking. Someone very different to me. So I might think about contrast. So I might have thought about rich and poor, old and young, someone who's very different to me. But actually, I don't want to be just myself. I want to create a bit of a character for myself and put myself in a different situation to make this story a bit more unique. So actually, I got into the idea of enemies, So someone very different to me might be an enemy. And I started thinking, so where in which situation might I have enemies? And I got to the idea of soldiers of wartime. And actually, I'm really interested. Again, I'm magpieing. I'm really interested in World War One, and I've read a lot about World War One. And one of the stories that fascinated me was this, the Christmas Truce, which is where enemy soldiers in World War One, it's a true story, met on no man's land on Christmas Day to kind of put a stop to the fighting for one day, and they played a game of football. And I really like that story, so I'm going to base my story, again, I'm kind of magpieing, on that idea. So let's have a little look at my plan. So I'm going to drop my reader in. I'm a British soldier, I'm feeling very afraid and nervous. What am I doing? I'm stepping out over the top of the trenches alone. Okay, it's just this moment before the Christmas truce. I'm going to imagine that I'm him. And where am I? I'm in the trench, there's water, there's lots of blood, it's frosty, there's shivering men. When is it? It's Christmas, it's snowy, it's cold. And why am I there? I'm absolutely sick of fighting and I want to share peace at Christmas time. Then I'm going to shift, I'm going to flash back to an earlier memory. What has led me to this moment? Why am I sick of the fighting? And I'm going to remember yesterday there was some really intense fighting, bombing, there's a gas attack. And I'm going to remember all the men around me dying, and I feel like it's got to stop. I'm going to return now to the present, and I'm going to zoom in. So in the present, I step over the line. Okay, this is a matter of moments. This is not a big long story. This is a few moments. Step over the line. And as I step over the line, I see this enemy pair of eyes glaring at me. And I freeze, but I feel afraid, but I'm also quite courageous and excited. And then I'm going to leave the scene. So the scene was that I was in the British trench. So I'm leaving, and I'm going to leave the trench and step out over the line. It's now or never. I'm going to enter no man's land. I'm going to describe the barbed wire, the shell holes. I hear nothing but silence. And then I see this man. I'm going to describe him walking towards me. And I'm going to describe him smiling and holding out his hand. And he's going to say something like hello or happy Christmas or something like that. Okay? So let's see now how I turn this into a piece of writing. Now, a really important thing to say is when you write, you must do these things. If you don't do these things, you will not get top marks. So first of all, you must make sure that your writing makes sense and isn't weird, confusing or unbelievable. I don't want stories that are just stupid. You've got to keep it simple actually, and remember to magpie. Some of the best stories are magpie characters, magpie ideas. I want you to write in paragraphs. You need to make sure that your grammar, punctuation and spelling is correct throughout. You need to make sure, this is a mistake that lots of us make at Art Kings, that we write in the same tense throughout, which means that we're not flipping between I see and then I saw. You've got to make sure that it's staying in the present tense throughout. And then I need to make sure this is getting me extra marks now. I need to use interesting and sophisticated vocabulary throughout. A range of punctuation, so exclamation marks, semicolons, question marks, speech. A range of sentence types, so we can have some really short sentences, one-word sentences, and then more complex sentences. And lots and lots of language devices, simile, personification, metaphors, repetition, lots of other techniques that you can use. And if you do all of those in your writing, it doesn't matter where you do them, you will get lots of marks. So let's have a look then about how I turned my plan into great writing. I'm going to read it to you. So this is my drop, okay? So this is how I started. And I wanted to start with this onomatopoeia that built a sense of suspense and really kind of showed off my sentence types as well. So it goes thump, thump, thump. My heart pounds in my chest like an anvil. Got a simile there. As I grip the very edge of the trench. I've made it really clear to my reader straight away where I am. I know I'm in a trench. My fingers grip the frozen earth. I've made it clear what time of year it is. And as I rise onto my tiptoes, my sodden feet squelch deeper into my boots. My toes are numb. I haven't felt them for weeks, even though I'm wearing the new pair of socks that Mother sent me for Christmas, and I've established it's Christmas time. I've still got to describe them now. I'm describing my toes, and I want to make it sound really grim. So they lie within their knitted coffins. I've got a metaphor there. Slowly mouldering and gangrening, as if they, like me, have lost their reason to live. So my first paragraph, I've used lots and lots of techniques, but I've also made it really clear, where am I? I'm in the trench. What time of year is it? It's Christmas time. Who am I? I'm a soldier. I haven't said that I'm a soldier, but it's really obvious that I am. And I've made it clear that I've lost my reason to live. Okay, let's keep going. All around me, my fellow soldiers are frozen to the spot, their eyes wide in shock and disbelief. I can feel their gazes burning into my back like the flares that we send up night after night in the desperate hope of some poor lost soul out on no man's land fighting their way back. Get back, lad, someone hisses in my ear. Got some speech here. You idiot, you don't want your poor mother hearing you've been shot on Christmas morning, another one shouts. Okay, I've made it really clear now it's Christmas morning. Thump, thump, thump. Now I've decided in my writing I want to repeat this. It's quite a nice technique. It shows my heartbeat all the way through the writing. Hands grab me and try to desperately pull me back, but I shake them off. It's now or never. I'm sick of this endless, pointless, torturous fighting. I've got to do something. I've got to do something good, something right, something that means something. Okay, that's my drop. Moving on to my shift. You can see again I've started with thump, thump, thump. That's kind of going all the way through my writing. Now I'm going to move to my flashback now, my memories of yesterday, the fighting. This is why I feel like I've got to do something. I've got to step out over that trench. I close my eyes, desperately trying to find that spark of courage and anger that got me here in the first place. Yesterday was the straw that broke the camel's back. The alarm had woken me at dawn. Okay, so this is my flashback now. Gas, gas! I'd grabbed my mask and just managed to secure it before that putrid odour had exploded into our digs. I was lucky. Many weren't. Range of sentences here. As the gas seeped in, the bodies began to writhe in their beds. I've got some really nice vocabulary here. I didn't just say the men began to choke. I described their bodies almost like they're in pain. The screams echoed around the muddy walls as the men choked and heaved and gasped for air. Similarly, like fish squirming wildly on the beach after a storm. Their eyes, I can still see their eyes, were fixed towards the entrance where light streamed through, burning and bloodied. But unlike me, their limbs and bodies were twisted and contorted, and they could not escape. Thump, thump, thump. That sight, that sound, that smell. Got an ellipsis here, ... I can't take it anymore. I came here to fight for king and country, but what does that mean now? ? The men that we fight are boys just like us. They suffer just like us. They weep and die just like us. I don't want to be part of this endless slaughter anymore. Thump, thump, thump. It's time. So that's my flashback. I've made it clear there what's happened, why I am about to step out over the trench, and my belief that actually I need to do something. I need to show a sense of peace. Return and zoom. So I'm returning back to the present now. This speech is going to snap me back into the present. You fool! You're going to get yourself killed. Someone yells at me as I raise my head high above the trench wall. Okay, so I'm doing something now. My whole body convulses as I raise my foot, heave myself upwards, and take a step out. Shum! I hear the familiar sound of rifles being rushed into position ahead of me. The German trench lies little more than 50 yards ahead. By now they will have seen me. Their fingers will be on the trigger and someone will be poised, their arm ready to throw down for the firing signal. I squint ahead of me. I've got a clear line through the barbed wire to cross no man's land. I take another slow step, and another, and another. Thump, thump, thump. My face is taut, my lips pursed, so I'm zooming in now on my appearance, my feelings. I'm waiting to be torn to pieces by bullets at any second, but there's no fire, just silence. Thump, 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 okay? So the zoom part now is where I'm zooming in on the German soldier who's going to be across from the trench from me. Suddenly, I see him, a figure rising up ahead of me. Through the swirling flakes of snow, he's hard to make out. His body is slight and his grey uniform sags across his chest. I take another step forward, so does he. I take another, so does he. I can see his face now. He's young, around my age. His eyes, I'm zooming in now on his appearance, are source around in fear and amazement. Another step forward, now I can see his hands. They're raised in the air like flags locked in a position of surrender. Okay? Now I'm leaving the trench and I'm going to zoom out to build a bigger picture of where I am. Thump, thump, thump. The British line lies several yards behind me now. It's now or never. I take a deep breath and stride forwards, my hands now raised to mirror his. I glance back behind me and see the aghast eyes of my fellow men trailing after me, their size diminishing until they look like tiny coins that I've dropped in the snow behind me. Thump, thump, thump. I continue to walk, my hands raised, blood rising to my face in a heady mix of panic and excitement. My mirror image does the same, and as we get closer, I raise my head to the sky and look up. So I want to zoom out now on the wider picture. I haven't felt this free in years. In the air, snowflakes dance and tumble like ballerinas, and for the first time, I notice swallows in the sky, dipping and diving in the open. Although the sky is blanketed in cloud, there are slivers of sunlight peeping through. Another 20 yards and we'll be face to face. There's no stopping me now. The fear of death has left me and has been replaced by that old Christmas spirit that I remember from my childhood. I stride forward, lowering one hand into a handshake. He's close to me now, and as we come face to face, I can see that, like me, he's smiling. Happy Christmas, I say. So that's my end. So actually, it's only a very, very short moment in time from the moment where I am at the edge of the trench, I step up, and then I leave the trench and start walking to no man's land. But actually, the descriptions here, if we just look at the list, does my writing make sense and is it simple? Yep, absolutely. Do I write in paragraphs? Yep. Is my grammar, punctuation, and spelling correct throughout? Yes, I went back and checked it. Did I write in the same tense throughout? Yep. Let me just check. I say, yep, I'm still in the present tense at the end. Did I use interesting and sophisticated vocabulary? Yes, I really thought about the vocabulary that I wanted to use to describe. Did I use a range of punctuation? Did I use exclamation mark? Yes. Lots of commas? Yes. I think I used all of these. Yep. Use a range of sentence types? Absolutely. And language devices? Simile? Yep. Personification? Yep. Metaphors? And I use lots of repetition as well, and onomatopoeia. So that is it. And if you can write like that, Year 11, you will get yourself a really, really great mark on this question. Now I'm going to go back to this part at the beginning to remember how important this question is. It is worth 40 marks. Don't forget about it. And make sure you use that technique so that you have a really clear structure to your writing. Good luck!